So, Alex, great seeing you again. We're here to discuss the real medieval roots of Death of a Unicorn. Folks who've already seen the movie certainly got a crash course in the art history, thanks to something called the Hunt of the Unicorn Tapestries, which figure prominently in the film. And I'm curious, do you remember the first time you became aware of these Gothic masterworks?
I don't because I grew up in around New York in the suburbs and went on like field trips to the Cloisters Museum where those are held and maintained and kept and I don't know, I was just like buried in my unconscious, and then at some point I forgot about them, and then when I was researching the movie I came upon them again and I was like, oh right, those things. And they sort of became a real like central kind of North Star of adapting them almost for the movie. So I don't remember when I first became encountered them because I was like a little kid. I was like 7 or something.
Yeah, the wrong era, but you're Rosetta Stone for the story a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to go through them one at a time and discuss, what each one meant for your film. The first image is something called Hunters Enter the Woods. It's pretty self-explanatory. All the king's men and dogs are on the prowl, on the hunt, as it were. And for you, was this just a medieval version of Paul Rudd driving too fast in a rental?
I mean, well, one thing that's interesting about the tapestries is that we don't know the order of them. Like they were never put, there's not like on the back of them, like number one, number two, number like, so people have put them in an order that seems to make sense. And I totally agree that this makes sense as the first one. But one thing that I thought was fun with like the movie is like they're not necessarily in the right order, you know? So there is a sequence later in the movie when the hunters in the movie are going after a presumably injured unicorn. And that's when we see this tapestry in the movie, in the context of there's like a cut that I really like of like a shot of them moving left to right, and then we cut to this shot of the unicorn hunters moving left to right into the woods. So this was not necessarily like about the Paul and Jenna first coming upon the unicorn. But this was one that I certainly was thinking about in the context to like one thing that's nice about this tapestry specifically is there's so much foliage, so much nature, and just this sense of like overwhelming nature, which I thought was, it's something people write about in the Unicorn Tapestries a lot, is this sense of the way nature is depicted in quite a striking way.
Well, actually, related to that, and this really applies to all of them, including this one, is that we have, again, all the king's men. And do you think it's an eternal theme about humanity's nature with nature itself, in the sense that whether it's a feudal lord or a pharmaceutical dynasty where we're always trying to control or exploit it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think it's telling that like in later tapestries, you see the Lord, and he's not in this one. He's sent out his minions to go get him this thing that he wants in the woods and to bring it back for him. So I mean, I totally think when you start digging into the tapestries and more broadly, most medieval unicorn mythology and lore, you end up with something that kind of really presents itself as a class commentary in that way.
Horse-like mammalia.
With some sort of protrusion or growth.
It's a fucking unicorn.
I don't think I should be in swim shorts for this moment.
Well, moving on to what some consider the second tapestry, but just another one of the unicorn
Absolutely.
purifying water. This is an image of clearly the unicorn's horn. Its blood has magical restorative powers. Did you get the idea of that for your film from this tapestry, or were you already there?
No, that was something, other lore really gets at not just the ability to purify water, but its ability to have curative properties more broadly speaking. It is interesting in this that like you see all the animals gathered around, which in lore, a lot the unicorns would be friends of animals and they would purify the water so other animals could drink from it. One thing that is fun in this tapestry is the fountain that's in. It's a funny thing. It's like I don't know why there's this fountain in the woods, and that's where it's like it's not purifying a stream; it's purifying water from a fountain that's kind of pouring out. But the fountain in the in the tapestries is one that we recreated and put in the movie. So in the courtyard of the house, there's a fountain that is exactly like that one. We modeled it pretty much as close as we could possibly get to it. Among the other animals that are drinking from the water in this tapestry, there are a couple lions The Leopold family is kind of the antagonist pharmaceutical family in the movie. Leopold Laboratories, obviously Leo Lion, like that's on one level, but Leopold Laboratories, their pharmaceutical company, the logo is a lion. In a lot of unicorn mythology, lions and unicorns were enemies. Here, they're kind of allies, or at least the unicorn seems to be happy to drink from the water that the unicorn has provided, or rather, the unicorn has cleaned, purified, rather.
I know you had the idea for this movie generally before the tapestries. How much was what you ended up making informed? For example, was Richard E. Grant's costume as he's going out to hunt unicorns, is that informed by the next tapestry?
Yeah, I mean a little bit. There's certainly lots of little textures and details, like Will Poulter's wearing his bathing suits. There's these really great stripes, vertical stripes on one of the characters, the pants, and that was certainly an influence that we took for Will. Costume wise, Paul wears blue throughout the movie. Ridley wears red throughout the movie. They're kind of moving towards each other, or rather, Jenna is Ridley's character. Sorry, she wears red throughout the movie. They're kind of moving towards each other. The Leopold family, which is played by Richard, Taya, and Will, they wear a lot of gold. It's gold, white, black. That's kind of their palette. But when you look at the characters in these tapestries, they're wearing red, blue, gold, and then that's kind of, the main. And then there's a lot of green in the background, obviously, which we brought in as well. So yeah, there is definitely was a lot of costume inspiration from the tapestries. But even beyond that, like our scientists have a sort of a collar that felt to us a little medieval in their lab coats, something about that of just knowing constantly like we're adapting these unicorn tapestries. It kind of infuses itself in non-explicit ways too.
I see a lot of that. And but to move on to what I think is one where we see a lot of influence in the movie is what some consider the fourth tapestry, which is the unicorn defends itself. In
Yeah.
in your research, is it fair to say that unicorns proved more violent than modern pop culture cares to admit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was one of the first bits of unicorn violence that I had seen in artwork that I thought was. I mean, when you look at in this tapestry, it is like when you go up close, you see it. It's stabbing this dog in the intestines, and it's a hunting dog. So I think it's self-defense. But it is really when you go very close, or if you get a high enough res version of it, you can really look in. It is very gory, the level of detail in this wound that it's inflicting on the dog. But beyond that, it's also kicking with its hind legs, which when you go back into historical accounts of unicorns, there is a lot of violence described, and then there's a lot of very violent imagery that you can find. They were not these passive creatures. They really were not afraid to bite and kick and use their horn to gore people.
On that note, in your movie, there's a great scene where a unicorn literally disembowels and begins to eat Tay Leone. Is that based on anything you read, or was that just you?
That specifically was more me. That one. But I mean, there are accounts of them using their teeth to bite people, so it felt like it wasn't that big of a jump. One other thing though that I'll just say, just like on the foliage front, I believe this is the one that has that orange tree at the very top of it, right? Yeah. And we did put an orange tree in the courtyard of the movie, and in the top left corner, you can also see the castle, which I think, oh no, I guess you could see it in the previous one as well, which was one of those things that when we found that house, that location, I got very excited because it had that red roof like the castle and the tapestries. I was like, oh, it felt like a message from the universe, that there was a certain resemblance to it.
I could see that. And well, speaking of resemblances, we're coming to the fifth one, which I know is also a pretty big influence. It's the unicorn surrenders to the maiden.
Hmm.
Did that image influence at all how you developed what became Jenna's character in the movie?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jenna wears a red hoodie throughout the movie, which has a very unusual shape, which actually is very much inspired by what the maiden is wearing in this, with this very kind of like wide sleeves. And so that was a hoodie that we found from a Japanese designer that they made it in gray and other colors, but we asked them to make it custom for us red. And it had this really interesting cloak kind of shape to it. Yeah, I mean, Jenna, when you dig into unicorn mythology, they would always, the only way to trap a unicorn was with a pure-hearted maiden. And so that got me thinking about, well, what is a pure-hearted maiden in 2025? And I started thinking it's probably a Gen Z leftist who's probably protesting on a campus somewhere right now, someone with very strong morals and ideals. And that sort of became a foundation for Jenna's character, certainly, and trying to figure out what that character might believe and think in the world. But what's funny about this one, just to say, is that the Maiden tapestry is itself, when you look at it in real life, it's about a third the size of the other ones. That's because it was damaged, tremendously damaged during, well, it was recovered after the French Revolution. It was believed to have been damaged during the French Revolution, perhaps. It was used on top of a sack of potatoes to keep them warm in the wintertime. And so they got totally tattered. And you could see that this tapestry is kind of two strips. But those strips, even if you put them together, are, like I said, about the size of a third of the rest of the other tapestries. So there's a whole lot of tapestry that isn't here, that no one knows what it is. And in fact, the very funny thing is, if you look in the bottom right corner of this tapestry, you can see just under the unicorn, you can see a woman's hand. So the maiden that the unicorn is actually surrendering to is not in the tapestry, which is very confusing. This is another maiden who happens to be like a handmaiden working with the maiden who is the bait. And I thought about putting that into the movie, but I was like, that is so confusing to try and teach people about that there is a maiden in this tapestry, but that's not the maiden it's surrendering to. It's surrendering to an off-screen maiden that we will never see. But what's fun about this one is because it is a tattered piece, because there's so much unknown about what the rest of the tapestry was, it kind of created this opportunity to develop what we referred to in the movie as the lost tapestry, which is imagining what the rest of this tapestry could be. This is only one third. What are the other two thirds of this tapestry that culminates in the unicorn surrendering to the maiden? And that sort of allowed us the leeway to, obviously a lot of the movie is bringing the tapestries into the present, but that afforded us the leeway to bring the present into the tapestries. And so the movie starts to inform this lost tapestry. And when we expand it, and we had these brilliant artists, this incredible artwork to take the figures of the tapestries and the style of the tapestries and infuse it with scenes from our movie. And so we expanded this tapestry into this lost tapestry that includes a lot of the kills and a lot of the fun elements of the horror language that we employ in the movie, but to put it in this medieval context, which came out, I think, in a really great way that I'm very excited about.
Yeah, it's a complete bloodbath, but a beautiful one. I want to combine the last two together here, which are, the hunters return to the castle, and then the unicorn rests in the garden. Between the two, we see the hunters drag what looks like a dead unicorn home, yet it is then reborn in what is considered by some the final tapestry.
Mhm.
Is this the happy ending the Will Poulter character is looking for?
I think it is. I mean, and just to say that the pose of the unicorn when it's killed and brought to the castle, in that you see the lady of the house in gold, which was, Tay Leone's in this cream colored suits throughout the movie. That was something we were definitely trying to play with. And the way, even the pose that the unicorn has is kind of draped over this horse. We had, when the unicorn is killed at the house, it has a similar pose where it's kind of draped out the window of a car. But yeah, I mean, the unicorn in captivity, that is the vision that Will Poulter's character is going after, is seeing this, this idea of we can own this thing and possess it forever, and it will be ours within these confines. But what's funny about it is when you look at it, it has like a very thin gold chain, or thin chain on it. It seems like it could break out of this, but it's not. So there are questions about the symbolic meaning there, and if there are, I don't know, other readings of, is it there by choice? Is it there being held as captive? Who knows? But that is his vision of the future, is if he can possess them and contain them, then he will have a limitless supply of unicorn.
Well, based on your movie, maybe it's just medieval propaganda because they don't want to be held captive in this. But
Exactly.
I did want to ask also about the ending. So the unicorns come back for the very final shot or very final sequence. Do you think they're there to try and rescue Jenna and Paul's characters at the end, or do you think they're after revenge?
I think my reading is that I think they're there to try and help Jenna and Paul's characters, but I also think they don't really understand how cars work or police or how any of these things actually function because they exist outside of society. But I think that they see that their friends are, that they see Paul and Jenna, who they are now have a fondness for, they have a connection with. They see that they're in trouble, they're trapped, they're being held against their will, and they're like, great, we'll just smash this car and that'll be that. I don't know what happens after that, but I think that is their very simplistic motivation in that moment.
Well, it's a fantasy. People can draw their own conclusions.
Yeah. Worst case scenario, they'll resurrect some people.
Thanks for doing this today. I saw some of y'all down in Austin, and yeah, I thought it was a fun time, and I thought it was great to get to dive deeper into the art history here.
Thanks, David. Yeah, it's something that I hope people take pleasure in and get to play with the level of, we put a lot of Easter eggs from these tapestries into the movie, and I think there's something fun about that kind of hopefully adds to a layer of rewatchability and maybe send some people to the cloisters to check out the tapestries in person.
That'd be a good legacy.
I'm picking up good vibrations.
Here's hoping we kill Bigfoot on the way home, huh?